What's up, UTU Trust Guardians, and welcome to another episode of the UTU Trust Guardian interview series. Here's where we chat with team members, investors, partners, and supporters of UTU to learn more about their backgrounds and what they're building, why they believe in UTU, and how they're helping to increase trust across the entire internet. Today, we are speaking with another UTU partner, and a very unique one, I must say. We are here with Dr. Sebastian Stein, Associate Professor in Artificial Intelligence and Multi-Agent Systems at the University of Southampton in the UK. We got a big brain on the interview here, so I hope he keeps it simple so my little brain can keep up. So we are collaborating with Dr. Stein and the University of Southampton in researching the creation of AI systems that are aware of citizens' preferences and act to maximize the benefit to society. Sounds a lot like what we're building at UTU, and we're going to get into that. Dr. Stein will, of course, talk much more about this. So we'll call you Seb. Seb, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Before we jump into the serious stuff, so we are recording this on July 22nd, 2021. It's about a week and a half after England's shootout loss in the Euro 2020 finals. So can you talk a little bit about that atmosphere when that was all happening, and have the UK citizens recovered from that loss yet?
Yes, Mike. That was a very exciting match. So we stayed up late to watch it, and especially after the first few minutes of that match, we really thought that England was doing very well, and we could see them do well in the tournament overall. But then, of course, things changed in the course of the match. That was really exciting. I think people have recovered now from the outcome, and of course, it's also led to quite an interesting debate in the UK about racism, and so there were some slightly unpleasant things that happened after the match and also during the whole tournament. But I think in the end, it's led to a good discussion amongst people. So I think that's good. I have to be completely honest. I'm not a huge football fan and don't normally follow it, but I do watch big matches like this, and that was really nice. And maybe me not being a big football fan is slightly unexpected for a German who's living in England. so people kind of expect me to be a big football fan. But it is exciting to watch it from time to time.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm not a huge football fan. It's just, soccer, as they call it here in the US. But, I just remember back in the day, I think I was backpacking around Europe, and it was in Amsterdam. I think Man U was playing Liverpool, and I was just watching it in the bar. It's not even in England, but just the passion was just amazing. There were Irish people there, there were the UK people there, and they were just trash talking each other, and there was so much. It was super intense but super fun, and just the passion really comes out for these matches. So it must have been a pretty amazing atmosphere there. So
and we also at work we've had many discussions, and it's kind of lit up our regular work meetings because there was always something interesting to talk about with football. And actually our head of school is English, but our deputy head of school for education is Italian. So we had nice exchanges between the two.
Cool. All right, let's get serious now. Let's start by learning more about your background, both on a personal and professional level.
Okay. So I was, as I alluded to, I was born and I grew up in Germany, in northern Germany near Hamburg. And I was there until about 13 when my family decided to move to the UK, which was really exciting for me, moving into a new culture, learning a new language. So I really enjoyed that move, and it was almost like going on an infinitely long holiday. So that was really nice. And I attended a European school in the UK, which is quite a special school system. You have students from all over Europe coming together, learning in different languages. So that was a really diverse experience, meeting lots of different people and I think that's had a big influence on me as a person. But then I decided to stay in the UK, and I thought for a long time about what to study. And one option was architecture, but the other option was computer science. And in the end, I decided to go with computer science because I like the logical problem solving and the mathematics behind it. And I also felt that it allowed me to be creative and apply it in lots of different domains, because you use computers everywhere, from games to doing business, and the whole internet, of course, is built on computers. So it's a really exciting field.
It's pretty interesting. I mean, like, architecture and computer science are two very different disciplines. What do you think is kind of like that vein that had made you interested in such two different subjects?
Yeah, good. I think it's because both of them allow you to be creative, because I also enjoyed art. It wasn't one of the main subjects I did at school, but I always enjoyed drawing and also, yeah, writing and expressing myself. But at the same time, I really liked mathematics and the logics behind it.
Yeah.
And I felt that both of these kind of allowed me to do these two things. So in architecture, you create things and you come up with interesting buildings, and you can be creative in that way. But you also have the mathematics and engineering behind it. And kind of the same in computers, I feel, because you build applications that people use. And again, there are applications in things like computer games, or now I'm focusing more on artificial intelligence. But again, it allows me to come up with, set my own problems, and then develop interesting novel solutions to these problems.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so let's segue into AI. You know, before we dig specifically into what you're working on, let's talk a little bit about on a broad level, right? So AI kind of has a controversial existence right now. You know, we know there's a lot of benefits to AI, right? Like, you know, I use Google Photos. It's an amazing app. They do facial recognition to categorize, you know, pictures of my daughter, my wife, my family, you know, automatically. Tesla has autopilot. You know, businesses use AI to sift through ridiculous amounts of data. On the flip side, you know, there's facial recognition is being used in ways in certain countries that, you know, that invade privacy. There's fear that robots will take over the world, especially you watch those Boston Dynamics robots like dancing better than humans do. There's, you know, racial biases of AI. So there's certainly two sides to this coin. Talk about what are the major misconceptions and the real concerns about AI that you see?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. And there's a lot about the dangers of AI in the media and in public discourse. So I'll start with a misconception, I think. So robots taking over the world, I think that is still very, very far-fetched and very far in the future.
So many movies being made about this, right?
yeah, it makes for a very nice and entertaining story.
Right.
But I think it's far from reality. So AI is powerful and it can do surprising things, and it seems like it displays some human level intelligence, but it's usually for very narrow, specific tasks. So like recognizing a pedestrian on the road so that you can avoid it with the autonomous vehicle. That requires a lot of engineering and human intervention to get a system that works really well in that very specific scenario. And it's usually not easily transferred to new application areas or problem domains. And again, if you want to do that, you need a lot of human intervention. So I think it's very far distant in the future that machines will come up with their own tasks to do, like taking over the world, and then learning to be good at these tasks. So it's not something that we need to worry about at the moment. But of course, as scientists and as practitioners, we do have to keep these possibilities in mind. And there's a lot of good work that is looking at the general safety of AI systems, especially in the area of general AI, that is trying to come up with machines that can adapt to new problems very quickly. So yeah, good that we keep this in mind, but I think it's very far in the future. But then you mentioned things like mass surveillance, issues around privacy, the inherent biases of AI systems. And it's not just racial bias, but gender bias and lots class bias as well in AI systems. And those, I think, are causing real harm already in deployed systems. And as we're using more AI systems, that's going to become a bigger problem. So that's definitely something that we have to do something about, and we have to do it urgently. At the same time, AI has huge potential, I think, especially in dealing with big societal problems that are facing us at the moment, like climate change. So I believe that AI can be a great help in reducing our energy consumption and making sure that when we use energy in the home, we use more renewable power. We're clever about when we're charging our electric vehicles, when we have them, or it may even allow us to switch to completely new forms of transport where we're using sometimes autonomous vehicles, but hopefully more likely also other forms of public transport. The AI systems will assist us in finding rental bikes and plotting routes for us that fit our personal requirements. So I think there's a huge benefit to using AI, and we have to overcome some of these misconceptions and some of these challenges to make sure that people can trust and really trust AI systems and are able to trust them and understand them. And this is this idea of citizen-centric AI systems that I believe is really important. We need to consider how people feel about AI systems. We have to put them into the center of AI systems. We need to make sure that they can understand how these AI systems work, and so on. So that's what I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, so you made a lot of good points there. Just and you talk about the citizen-centric, and really a lot of these things come down to making things easier and more convenient for citizens, right? But they have to be able to trust that these are good solutions for those, right? So So let's dig into a little bit more about the research you're doing in that citizen-centric AI. It's obviously extremely important, but very complicated stuff. So explain it to us, and then give us a little bit more background on some of these applications that you're working on.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I think to be able to build citizen-centric AI systems that are trustworthy by non-expert citizen end users, I think they have to fulfill 4 important features or criteria. So first of all, these AI systems have to be aware of the preferences and the constraints of individuals. Mm-hmm. So that means that the system knows, for example, when you're going to be at home, or what temperature you like your thermostat to be set at, in order to make good decisions about your energy use, scheduling your energy consumption at home, trying to maybe shift your consumption more to times where renewable energy is available rather than the coal-powered energy that we often still use nowadays. Mm-hmm. So these systems really have to understand what your individual constraints are. And those constraints are quite different from one person to another, also depending on context. And this is very challenging, partly because the AI system may not have a lot of data about you. You just bought your smart home system. It's observed a few interactions of you setting the temperature, and then it has to make some inferences based on that. So this is quite challenging, and it's different from what the kind of requirements of deep learning systems that are widely used in AI and machine learning at the moment, that usually require tons of data from people. But in these settings, data is very scarce. And also, you may not want to share that data with your energy provider or with other people necessarily. So really, ideally, you want these AI systems to just use your data, safeguard it, and make the decisions based on the data that you provide to the system with your consent. So yeah, that's that's one aspect.
Yeah, it's a bit of a catch. Well, just before you jump to the next aspect, it's a bit of like a catch-22 there, right? It's like you can't sometimes you can't collect enough data to prove to someone that what the AI is going to do is going to be convenient and beneficial to them.
Yeah.
And you need that data before you can prove that, in order to prove that. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are lots of ways that this can be mitigated. So a system may be able to rely on some anonymized generic data that other people have given consent to be used in this kind of context.
Right, yeah.
So it can make a good guess what your typical patterns are. Are you a normal person who commutes to the office in the morning, or are you someone who's working from home? And based on these, it may make some decisions even with very little data.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is, I think these AI systems also need to engage in a dialogue with the user. So when it's uncertain about your preferences, it may go back to you and ask you for clarification. So I've noticed that recently you went to work very early in the morning. Was this a one-off thing, or you normally need to leave early on Tuesday mornings? Just to give a random example.
Interesting, yeah. Okay. Great.
So then the second feature I think is important is that the systems, of course, have to make decisions based on these preferences that are clearly beneficial to the user. So the AI system will make sure that your home is set at a comfortable temperature for you when you come home. It will try to make sure that your electric vehicle is fully charged, or that you get the type of transport that you prefer, whether that's a bike or it's an autonomous taxi that's picking you up from home. So then needs to be a clear benefit to you, and it needs to take into consideration your preferences. But a big challenge here is that you can't make everyone happy. Sometimes you will have limited resources in the system, limited energy, a limited amount of autonomous taxis that you can send to people's homes to pick them up. Or if you send too many, it will cause congestion and maybe air pollution as well. So how do we deal with these conflicts of preferences? And I've done quite a bit of research in that area, also applying what's known as game theory to model how self-interested people will behave in these kinds of settings. But how can we make sure that we still get a good outcome for everyone? And that sometimes means putting incentives into the system. So one area I've looked at is electric vehicle charging. I've given a few examples like using that before. So you have lots of people who come home in the evening, they want to charge their car, but the system, the distribution infrastructure may not be able to charge them at the same time. So you start prioritizing some cars over others.
Right.
But here you can be clever and you use the constraints of people, and you give some people a discount for being more flexible in their charging behaviors. So some may be happy to charge the next day or sometime overnight. And then they get a discount on their energy bill for that. And so you get an outcome that is good for everyone in a sense. Even if someone needs their car urgently, they might pay a little bit more for their energy, but they will get priority in the system.
Yeah. Incentives. I mean, they show me the incentives. I'll show you the results, right? That's really how you change behavior.
Yeah, exactly. But then, moving on from that is also lots of ethical considerations around this. And so these AI systems, of course, need to be sensitive to citizens' ethical values. And that includes things like discrimination that you mentioned before. So these systems might have been trained on data that already has certain biases in it, or maybe the data about energy consumption is from people who can afford a smart meter, who can afford an electric car. And so the system is optimizing for these types of people only, and not for other parts of society. And that's a real concern. And in these settings, it's really challenging also because they are you make dynamic decisions over time, and the decisions you make now will affect what's possible in the future. So that it's, yeah, a really challenging decision-making problem.
Yeah.
But also moving beyond discrimination, another issue is also equitability. And so if you want the system to behave similarly for similar people. So if your neighbor also has an electric car, and you can see they are always getting charged ahead of you, even though they go to the same workplace or have otherwise the same constraints as you, then of course people will feel that is very unfair.
Yeah.
And so we need to design these AI systems to take that into consideration. So then, yeah, that's also connected to the fourth feature. So I've been talking about these four features that I think are important. And I think that the final feature that's really important is that the systems are in some sense auditable and explainable, so that non-expert users can understand how and why they're making decisions. Yeah. So that if you see your neighbor is getting prioritized, at least you understand the system and you know why in certain situations they might get priority. But of course, this is very challenging. Some of these algorithms are highly complex. Sometimes even AI experts don't fully understand them, or at least don't understand why they make specific decisions in specific cases. So that is a huge challenge, and that needs to be addressed. And I think sometimes a simpler algorithm might be better in these settings because they are potentially simpler to explain to non-expert users. But yeah, also having these explanations then allows people to have a dialogue with the designers of the systems or the people who manage these AI systems about how these should behave. And so, for example, when is prioritization of electric car users useful and sensible, but when is it not appropriate? Or what are the limits to this? Should there be some energy that is given out randomly to people so that everyone gets a fair share and maybe only part of it is prioritized? Or should we always give the energy to those that are willing to pay the highest price? Mm-hmm. So these are all really interesting questions and things that I'm addressing in my research.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot to think about. And I mean, it's amazing that you're able to make all these considerations, right? And but it's very challenging that you have to make all these considerations. But I mean, that's kind of part of it. You're talking about citizen-centric, like that's human nature, right? They're like, we consider all of these things, maybe subconsciously or consciously, but all of these things come into the thousands or tens of thousands of decisions that we make every day. So if you're building models around that, you have to factor all those considerations in your models as well. So where are you in, you talked a lot about these four main factors, and like, where are you in your research? What do you see as kind of your end goal? What's the end product, and what's the timeline of you getting there?
Okay. So I've been working on some of these topics for quite a while now, and especially looking at these first two features that I mentioned, looking at how we can model people's preferences, and then the second one, how can we make beneficial decisions based on these preferences, and how can we deal with conflicting preferences as well? How can we inject these incentives? And I've applied that to electric vehicle charging, as I said, but also other domains like on-demand transportation, competition for autonomous taxis, or car sharing schemes, or in ride sharing schemes.
Yeah.
I've also looked at applications of incentives and crowdsourcing, which is a little bit different, but similar challenges arise there as well. But at the moment and in the near future, I will focus more on the equitability, on the perception of fairness of these mechanisms, and on how we can involve the human users more through explainability and also these continuous feedback loops. So that's where my focus will be in the next few years. In terms of a product, so I envisage that in the near future, we will have some intelligent AI system on our mobile phone that knows our behavior patterns and our preferences. But importantly, this data is stored locally on our phone. It's not necessarily shared with companies. So it's really to make sure that that private information is safeguarded and only shared when we give our consent. Mm-hmm. And then these AI systems help us make good decisions. For example, scheduling the energy use at home, switching on our electric vehicle charging system, or planning a transportation route for us based on our personal preferences. So I see. So we call these intelligent agents because they make decisions and actions on our behalf, and they really support us. And I hope that the interactions with these agents will be, as I said before, kind of minimal and in the background as much as possible. Just through observing our choices, they start to understand us and help us make good decisions. But sometimes there will have to be this dialogue between us and our agents where we correct its beliefs and give feedback when it makes bad choices for us.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I hope that in the next 5 years, we will have some of these agents in specific application areas like smart energy or smart transportation.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Just being able to kind of just automatically come up with these solutions, because I live in a city. I live in Washington D.C. and I think about transportation all the time, right? And I'm like, okay, do I ride my bike? Do I take a scooter? Do I take the metro? Do I drive? And unfortunately, a lot of times I just drive because it's the easiest thing for me to do, which is not the best thing for the environment. So definitely I've been trying to consciously ride my bike a bit more, take an electric scooter. But yeah, to be able to, have these, put in a destination, have this stuff planned out for me, mapped out for me, to benefit, both myself as well as overall, all the world, the climate, the society, energy use, etc. Is definitely a huge vision, but yeah, something that's super important.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you've got a ton on your plate. So talk a little bit how UTU will be working together with you on your research. What does the partnership entail, and what roles will both of us play in this research?
Okay, yeah, so I'm really excited about this partnership with UTU. So actually, UTU has been quite closely involved in shaping this research vision that I've just explained. And they have been working with me on writing a proposal to UK Research and Innovation, which was for a Turing AI Fellowship, a big research project that is funding my work for the next 5 years. And UTU is an official partner on that project. So I'm really excited because UTU has excellent expertise in bringing trusted digital technologies to the market and to end users. And I think working with an industry partner is hugely important for academia. Otherwise, we're working in a bubble and we're coming up with these nice, great ideas, but in the end, they don't get applied. And that's why having an industrial partner like UTU on this type of project is hugely invaluable. So I'm hoping that UTU will connect me to end users and potential products that can use some of the technologies that I'll be developing. And I think that's going to benefit UTU because UTU will get the benefit of the latest research that is being done and hopefully make their products more citizen-centric, ensure that the preferences of users are modeled and that people can trust the products. But of course, it also helps me to gain some impact out of this research and also to shape the direction of it. So to give some real world constraints and inputs to make sure that we're actually addressing real problems that have to be solved. And yeah, to be maybe a little bit more specific about what Utu and I are going to work on together. So I talked a lot about modeling the preferences of individuals, observing someone's behavior, and then making decisions based on that. But actually, where you can get a lot of extra information is from other peers like yourself. So you might be connected to family members, of course, through your social networks or trusted colleagues, and they might have similar preferences to yourself. And often you want to benefit from recommendations through your social network. So in a smart transportation application, maybe your peers have used a particular transport provider and they can recommend their services, or looking at completely different application areas. You've maybe moved to a new area and you're looking for a childminder or a trusted doctor whose services you need. And here you can really benefit from getting recommendations from your friends, from your direct connections. So it's not a generic recommender system like TripAdvisor or Amazon, where you're recommended generic products that are similar to your previous purchase patterns, but you really want trusted advice. And I'll be working with Utu on how we can build these social recommender systems that are giving you recommendations from your peers in a social network. And there are lots of interesting challenges arising here. So first of all, how can we identify good recommendations that are useful for us?
Yeah.
But also, how can we decide what data we're willing to share with our peers? And maybe we're willing to share some data with some of our peers, but not others. Maybe we're willing to share data only in anonymized format, so we can be sure that our peers don't know that a specific recommendation comes from us. And I think that's a really interesting open research question. I think also going back to these biases and discrimination, I think that's a huge concern that would need to be addressed. How can we make sure that there are no biases or these so-called filter bubbles emerging in our social networks, where we're just given recommendations that confirm our own beliefs and maybe prejudices. And yeah, so that's one specific application area I'll work on with Utu. And I've just hired an intern who will work with me and partners from Utu over the summer on developing a product in the space and testing it with users. So yeah, really excited about this collaboration.
So yeah, just a couple of points on that. I mean, there's, like you said, you're going to benefit from us delivering these applications and having some real world user testing, and we are definitely going to benefit from, we can't do all the research. This is all like bleeding edge stuff that you're living and breathing every day. So we're certain this is certainly there's tons of synergies there that mutually beneficial. And yeah, we are really excited because it aligns so well with what we're trying to build. And just looking, everything that you're thinking about is putting the user in the middle of, as being just the primary consideration of everything, whether that has to do with understanding their preferences, understanding how to best deal with their data privacy, and just being able to really understand what's going on when they make decisions. So yeah, I think it's an amazing partnership, and you're breathing this stuff every day, and we just we're applying it, and there's so much for us to learn about both the technology, about the users. So but that's why I think this is such a perfect partnership. And yeah, so of course, any support and anything that you need from us, we are obviously very happy to provide at any time. So thanks for all that information, Seb. And we have just a ton to learn, and it's so awesome that we're working together. But let's
Likewise from me. I have a lot to learn from you as well. And I really enjoy all the interactions that I've had with UTU so far, actually going back many years now. Yeah, I've met Bastian and Jason from the team a few years ago when they visited Southampton. And I've known Bastian for your CTO, I believe, for many years. He also did a PhD in multi-agent systems.
Yeah.
So, yeah, always been a great pleasure to work with UTU.
Yeah, I'd like to be a fly on the wall for the conversations that you guys have about this stuff. Pretty heavy stuff, I'm sure. So, all right, well, Seb, let's move on to the quick fire questions where I'll ask you 3 questions in succession to learn more about you. Ready to go?
Yep, ready.
All right, first one. Tell us something unique and interesting about you that not many people may know.
Okay, so I think probably not many people know that in my spare time, I'm a dungeon master. And this may not be what you think it is. It's fairly innocent. In my spare time, from time to time, I play tabletop role-playing games, and Dungeons and Dragons is one of those. And especially during the pandemic, it's been a huge help in escaping reality for a bit on the weekend, and also keeping up with old friends from school.
Did you ever get competitive with that stuff? I know a lot of people.
No, not really. It's purely for fun. When I was at school, I used to play Magic: The Gathering, which is a collectible card game.
Yeah.
And I did go to some competitions, and once by complete luck, I won one of these competitions.
Wow, good, nice, very cool. Okay, number 2, if you could chat with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I think it would be Hayao Miyazaki, which is a Japanese animator. Whose movies and books I greatly admire and really enjoy and have enjoyed for a long time. And I think it would be great to ask him where he gets his inspiration from for the kind of, very fantastical settings and stories that he's written. And I wouldn't mind if he could give myself and me, myself and my family maybe a drawing lesson. That would be really good. My son really enjoys drawing at the moment, and it would be nice to get some guidance from him.
Yeah, it goes back to the kind of that interest in art that you had.
That's right? A good point. Yes, yeah.
Very cool. Last one. What is something that you believe but few others agree with?
Okay, that's going to be a bit controversial, and maybe my Italian friends will hate me for this, but if I'm out of ingredients at home and I'm hungry, I think pasta with ketchup and cheese is quite a nice dish.
Oh, God. Oh, wow. Okay. That one is pretty controversial.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny. My dad used to put ketchup on his salads. I was like, what? But I do love ketchup myself. Yeah, I can't say I agree with you on that, but it's tomato sauce, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. So awesome. That's all we have. Seb, thank you so much for taking part in this Trust Guardian interview, telling us your story, and I think obviously your knowledge about AI is unmatched, but also really enjoyed your personal views on AI, and clearly identifying what those misconceptions are, as well as what the real problems are, and the drawbacks of AI. So tell the UTU community where they can learn more about the work that you're doing.
Okay, yeah. Well, first, thanks, Mike, for inviting me to this as well. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully see you again soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if your listeners would like to find out a bit more about the project, the 5-year project that I mentioned that you're a partner on, they can go to my website about that project, which is it's quite a mouthful. So,
we'll post the link in the
post
video notes.
the link below the video, but it is CCAIS, and that means Citizen-Centric AI Systems. So CCAIS .soton, SOTON, that's short for Southampton, .ac.uk. And I'm also on Twitter, and my handle is @Dr. Seb Stein. So
okay,
DRSEBSTEIN.
Sure. Yeah. Of course, we'll post those links so no one has to write that down and memorize those. Great. Awesome. So, all right, Trust Guardians. We hope that you enjoyed that interview with Dr. Seb Stein. Please hit that like button if you did. There will be many more interviews to come. So hit those subscribe and notification buttons so you do not miss them. Thank you so much for tuning in, Trust Guardians. Seb, thank you so much for coming on to the show and dropping all your knowledge in here. Really appreciate it. And we are very, very excited to continue this partnership and just continuously learn from the work that you're doing. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Okay.
Thanks, Seb.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye.